Hello YouTube and welcome to another episode of my motor grader. In this episode we're going to concentrate on trying to get the saddle centered. Let's get right into it. So the last problem I was talking about was the fact that the saddle is not centered. The pin is actually in the first hole to the right of center and I had to get it out of there. So what I did, and I neglected to film this, is I came over here to the control valve, and the bottom hose that you can see, which I've disconnected, that's actually the return line from this cylinder up here. Now this is really a very strange cylinder. It's not a traditional hydraulic cylinder in any sense, because the rod is actually not a rod, it's a pin, and it does have a piston. But the really curious thing is the piston has a uniformly flat back surface, right? And the rod, which is actually the pin, only sticks out of one side of it. So that means that the surface area on the back is much bigger than the surface area on the front. And the hose that you see here in this picture is actually the pressure line. So that's going towards the front of the pin and pushing fluid into that front chamber, pushing that pin towards the back, in other words, retracting it. And then this hose up here that comes out the back of it is this return line that comes over here to the valve and goes up from the bottom of the valve to this line over at the top of the valve, and then back to the return that you see here. And then this, of course, is the master pressure regulator valve, and that hose there is coming off of the hydraulic pump, and then this valve regulates the pressure to various places and distributes it to various places, including the control valves up here in the cab. But anyway, all that said, I needed to get the pin out of there. So what I did is, as you can see, I disconnected that hose, which comes from the back of this cylinder up here, and therefore would relieve any fluid pressure on the back of that pin. And then what I did was I came over here to the front of the crossbar on the saddle, and I took a rather large bolt and I stuck it in the hole there. And I guess maybe I can't really see the screen here very well, but perhaps you can see whether the pin's in there or not. It was in there. And so I just took a really big bolt and a 3-pound hammer, and I just pounded on it until the pin retracted. I need to figure out a way to stop the pressure from going to this cylinder up here, because my understanding is the pressure line here, this piston actually deliberately leaks. I'm not entirely sure how these things work. It's the craziest hydraulic cylinder I've ever seen. But my understanding is the pressure goes through this hose into the front chamber of this cylinder, and then part of it leaks to the back chamber and then into that return line, which comes down here and then leaks out. And the supply comes from this line here, and that goes to the front pressure line there. So what I think I need to do is disconnect this and cap it so that no fluid will be flowing into the cylinder, and then I can hook this back up, although at that point it shouldn't matter. I shouldn't need to, because there won't be any return fluid coming from it. So I think we're okay there, although I don't know for sure if there's going to be any fluid in this line, which might come back this way and then down through here. So I'll probably hook that back up and then try to cap this and then fire the machine up, and hopefully that will keep the pin out. If I had a sheet of tin or something, I'd stick it in there to keep the pin from going back in the hole. But if there's no hydraulic pressure on that cylinder, I wouldn't think that I don't think the pin would go forward. So that's what I'm going to try. And if I can do that, and I can fire up the machine and the pin doesn't go back in the hole, then presumably I can use the combination of the lift cylinders and the circle side shift cylinder to reposition the saddle in such a way that this center pin here is lined up with that. And then I can hook everything back up the way it should be, and the deck will be where we want it to be. That's the idea. Let's see how it goes in practice. Okay, so with that comedy out of the way, let's take a look at this thing. In this image, there's an illustration of the control valve and the cylinder for that saddle pin. Now, the thing I don't like about this is the cylinder is rotated 180 degrees from how it actually sits on the grader, but you kind of get the general idea. And as I explained in the video, this thing doesn't work. All right, the pin will not retract. You should be able to push that golf tee looking thing down that's on the floor of the cab of the grader, and that should activate that control valve and cause the pin to retract. Now it doesn't do that. Now oddly enough, the pin does go forward, and as you'll see as this video progresses, I just commit no end of errors in trying to figure this out and fix it, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's take a look at this picture, and you can see that control valve over there to the right side of the image, and you see the two hoses labeled as number 7 that go to the pipes 6 and 10 that go to the hoses 4 and 5 over at the cylinder. Now hose number 4, which is on the back of the cylinder, says it's the return line, so I would assume that's the direction that hydraulic fluid is flowing out of that cylinder back to the drain. And hose number 5, it says, is pressure, so I would assume that that's the line that's under pressure when you want to retract the pin, because it should push the pin back into the cylinder. And then you look over at the control valve, there's two hoses of it that are both apparently return lines. The one that says pin return going from hose number 4 into line number 10 and then into the hose that connects to the bottom of the control valve. Presumably the fluid flows up through that control valve and then out the other hose over to that little junction marked number 8. Now what I really don't understand is you see the master pressure regulator down there to the bottom right hand, and then you've got a couple of different connections there. You've got one just to the left of it that's pipe number 6 that is the pin pressure, right? Presumably that's high pressure. I don't really know. And then you've got that 4-way coupler there, number 8, is that a return? Is that pressure? I don't really know. It's going to a parking brake and a brake line, so I'm very puzzled as to how all of this works, quite honestly. One other thing I wanted to show you here was a picture of the valve itself. So if we look at the right hand side of this figure, you see number 12 is this plunger, which just looks like a golf tee, and that thing should normally be sticking up, right? And that when it sticks up, that means the pin is in the saddle and it's locked in place, and then when you push that down into the floor, then it should cause the pin to come back. Now mine doesn't work. For one thing, that plunger is stuck in the down position, which you would think would cause the pin to retract, but doesn't. So I'm very puzzled as to what's going on. It may be the case that that valve is bad. It doesn't look terribly complicated, and it's not big, so I could easily yank it off the machine and disassemble it and see what's going on in there. You know, from looking at this, it doesn't look like there's a lot to it. You see the two items labeled number 2, adjustable elbows. Well, that's where the hoses go in, one at the bottom and one in the back that's a little bit above that. And then there's that little ball labeled as number 11 there, and presumably when you push down on the plunger, it pushes that ball down and blocks off the flow between the two hoses there. At least that's my understanding of it. And then the last picture I have for you is the cylinder, which is the pin, and we have sort of a cross section and also a isometric view of it here. You could see the front of the pin is to the right, and the piston and the back of the cylinder is to the left. Yeah, there's not much to say here. That thing out there towards the front of it, number 15, that's an electrical switch that oddly enough works, and what that does is when the pin is retracted, it lights up a red light on the dashboard of the grader, and like I say, that does work, but the pin will not retract for whatever reason on its own. It will go the other direction. It will extend out into the hole, so I don't really know what's going on here. Maybe if somebody sees this video at some point in time and understands how all this stuff works, and they'd be kind enough to leave in the comments what's going on here, it would really help demystify the situation. You can kind of see here that towards the back of the pin there's that piston, and I'm sure if you squirt fluid into the front chamber there, it pushes that piston back and pulls the pin out of the saddle, and if somehow you put fluid to the back of it, why then it moves the pin forward. But how all of that works based on that control valve, I really don't have a clue. Well, here's some hillbilly engineering at its finest. I tried I tried actually to remove that line right there and cap it, but of course I don't have a hydraulic fitting, and guess what, a 3/8 brass plumber's fitting will not fit a J6 jig, so that didn't work. So I hooked up all the lines again, and now I'm going with a different idea. So I didn't have a piece of tin, so the only thing I've got laying around is this old saw that I really don't care about, and so I've got it wedged in here, held up by a monkey wrench on this side, and over here a stick through that hole. Now, the purpose of this saw blade is, if you can barely see in there, it's blocking the pin from being able to move forward. Now, I don't think that pin has a great deal of pressure on it to move forward. I mean, hopefully it's not going to punch a hole in that saw blade. I can't imagine that it will, but it'll probably try to put some pressure on that saw blade, which is fine. That'll just help to bind it in place, I guess. And hopefully this will stay put, and it won't go back into that hole. This hole here is the one we wanted in, but what I'm going to try to do now is I'm going to try to fire the machine up and lift the blade off the ground, and then hopefully what will happen is the whole saddle will shift as I'm able to play around with the controls a little bit, because I want the saddle to actually shift to the right to where this hole lines up with the pin, and then hopefully I can pull the saw out of there and just let the pin pop back into that. So we'll see how that actually works. Well, that didn't work worth a damn, but you can see the saw got pinched in place, so the pin didn't go into the hole, and it did put quite a bit more pressure on that saw than I thought it would, but the pin is not in the hole. However, the saddle did not want to move, so I'm really concerned about that, because I'm a little worried that maybe one of these big pins, like this one or this one or this one, is seized. I know this one isn't seized, but I don't know about on the other side. This one on the other side would be the real concern, because those lift arms, these giant lift arms here, should pivot around that point, and it's critical that it do so. And you can see that it's still not centered. Now the good news is the pin is retracted, so now what I'm thinking I want to do is to remove both lift cylinders from the bottom ball joint and this side shift cylinder from this ball joint, and then fire up the machine and just retract these so that there's no force on any of these ball joints, and basically at that point the saddle will be completely free, other than just the forces of gravity acting on it from the cylinders and the lift arms. And then what I propose to do is get out my backhoe with all of this stuff being free and just smack this thing and see if one of those pins is seized. Maybe if I smack it with the backhoe, it'll break it free and shift this saddle over. So that's what I'm going to try next. Well, thankfully these really weren't on there very hard, because you know, it's just a normal wrench. I'd never been able to bust it, but I thought I would try that before I did anything else. It's such a pain in the ass though, with this thing pivoting like it does, you know. You can't even get a damn wrench on here or a socket or anything else, and you've got no way to really move anything on that damn ball joint. So try to turn it by hand, eh? I'm sure this thing has never seen grease in its entire life either, just like the one on the other side. There we are. There's some parts I gotta clean there. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, there's the other shim I was gonna say. The other side had two shims. So that's that one. Yeah, wonderful. Great. Lefty loosey, righty tighty, something like that. I guess that's how that works. There we are. God, I just put these in here. You'd think they'd be easier than this. Alright, well, there's that one. Yummy. I guess all the cool kids wear gloves and stuff, huh? I'm just too old school for that. You don't get your hands dirty, you're not a real mechanic, eh? Alright, so that one's off, the other side's off. Now we just gotta crack this damn thing over here. Yeah, this ought to be fun, right? Well, let's have a go at it. Boy, this is a pain in the ass. You can't really get a wrench on these things here. But I think you probably can get, hopefully you can get a socket on there. I don't know, let's see. Yeah. Socket, breaker bar, and this away here, huh? Oh shit. God damn it. That ain't going nowhere. Let's try this one. Oh, that's not even on there that good. Oh, there we go. That one broke. So that's good. That ain't been out of there in 40 years, has it? So that one, but we still got this bastard. We still got this one here. Oh man. Time to put the cheater to it and hope the hell that works. Alright. Let's put the old cheater bar on there and see what we can do, huh? Oh, there we are. What was the expression? Give me a fulcrum and I can move the earth or something like that? There we go. Alright. That's what I like to see. You didn't have to use a torch or nothing, eh? There we go. Now you reckon this thing's gonna fall down on me? Wouldn't be a little surprised. Yeah, no. You reckon that whole damn thing's gonna fall if I take this one out? Probably fall and smash my fingers and I won't be able to stop it. Or maybe not. I don't know. Right, yeah, she's bound up on that ball, right? Yeah, that's going to be fun with only one person. You know, it'd be nice if you had two people, one out here and one in the cab to run the controls, because I guess I'm just going to get an old pile of rags or a pillow or some damn thing to put underneath it, so, and then when I retract the rod and it falls, it won't break anything. I mean, that's my best guess right now. Alright, well, I got this old chunk of carpet wadded up and tucked under that circle side shift cylinder. So now the theory is when I retract this rod, it comes off of that joint, it falls down into the carpet and doesn't break anything. And then these two lift cylinders should just go straight up. At least that's what I'm hoping. So let's see if I can set the camera up here. And maybe we can watch all that happen. So, what have we got now? We've got, you know, this lift arm is completely free, and the same thing is true with that lift arm, and the saddle is completely free, so I see no reason, and the pin is obviously not in the hole because that's why that saw is bound up there. So if I come along with the backhoe, because, you know, it's not like I can budge this damn thing, but if I come over with the backhoe and give it a nice smack somewhere in here, I'm hopeful that it will cause this to pivot. I mean, the way these things work is there's a pivot here, there's a pivot here, and there's a pivot here. Now, what's the chance that this one's seized? God only knows. I don't believe that one's seized because I can actually rotate that left and right. And this one, there's no telling on it either. I don't think, I don't have the equipment. I mean, God only knows what this lift arm weighs. A lot. That's a cast piece of steel right there. So, yeah, that's got to weigh a lot. And, there's no way I could ever get these out of here to do anything with that. So if that's seized up, I guess we're really in bad shape then. But hopefully it's not, and hopefully we've got the same situation over here on the other side, because you can see with that cockeyed saddle, that just makes life miserable. I mean, you really get a good look at it by looking at the top of those lift cylinders. And you notice that both of them are pretty much straight up and down, but look how much higher the one on the left side is than the one on the right. And that's because you can see the lift arm on the left side is way down. Now, the other thing I could do, I guess, is I could either try to push on that side, or I could try to lift on this side actually, but I'm not sure. I don't know what I've got here that I could lift with. Maybe I could take a chain and put it around this thick part of this lift arm and chain it up to the bucket of the tractor and see if I could lift on that, because that's really what you want to do, is lift right here. And the idea that lifting here should cause it to pivot about that pin and about that pin and slide this whole saddle to the left and level things out. But I don't know, that seems pretty sketchy, but that's what we've got to try. So now that I've got that hose off the bottom of the control valve there for the pin cylinder, I should be able to get the pin to release itself just like I did before. I mean, it's not actually in the hole, but it is pressed up against that saw pretty tight. Here's what I used to get it out in the first place, this big bolt and this hammer. So I'm just going to stick that in there and give it a couple whacks. Yeah. And I reckon the saw might fall out of there now. Or maybe not. Maybe I need to pound on it a bit more. Yeah, look at that. How about that? You see that thing slip? That was pretty sweet, eh? Yeah, that's what we wanted to have happen. So it was all binding up on that saw. How about that? Let's pull that out of there. Oh. Well, how do you like that? It did quite a number on the saw, didn't it? It's a good thing I didn't like the saw. You can see where the pin is no longer lined up with this first hole to the right. We want to line it up there, but you saw it move, so that's good. That's really good news, because that means these this pin up here and this pin down here and the pin that's behind this thing are not seized, so that's really good news. The mystery, of course, is where did that chunk of the saw blade go? And I'm actually surprised it put that much hydraulic pressure on there, and I can't really see where it did a hell of a number to that saw, didn't it? Nice. I moved this left-hand lift cylinder out of the way because it was binding on the frame here, and now I've almost got this centered, and actually I can grab this knob here, believe it or not. Look at that. So those pins are not seized, and right there is exactly where I want that to be. So now my theory is, if I start the machine, the pin should pop out right in the center hole there, and then we can run these lift cylinders to where we can get the ball joints reattached, and then get this thing going. That would be just wonderful. So let's see how that goes. I started the grader and moved the cylinders into position to allow me to reattach them to the ball joints. I first did this with both of the lift cylinders, and then later with the circle side shift cylinder. There really isn't much to see here, so I sped it up quite a bit. I guess if I were a YouTube celebrity, this is the point where I would cue the drum and bass soundtrack, but since I'm not, you'll just have to listen to silence for a little bit while the remaining video plays. As an alternative, I could have left the original audio intact and tried to speed it up. However, I'm using DaVinci Resolve, the free edition of it, as my video editor, and I've noticed a great deal of trouble trying to edit videos where you speed up both the audio and the video soundtrack and crop them at the same time. That just simply doesn't seem to work, but maybe I don't know what I'm doing. It's obvious that I don't know what I'm doing with the grader, so I probably don't know what I'm doing here in YouTube either. I think we got that taken care of. Look at this beautiful view from the cab through that cracked windshield there. It's your right hand lift cylinder and your left hand lift cylinder, and everything's nice and level and square. I can't believe it. Let's go grade us some roads. Oh, now that she's all back together, greased up, everything looks good. Look at that. Saddle is in the center pin. Everything's hooked up. Looks beautiful. Very happy with how this turned out, even though I had no clue what I was doing. Did everything wrong and half-assed. End result is what counts. I think we're ready to grade some roads. I'm gonna get to it.